There is a hill outside the village, not a tall hill, not a dramatic hill, just a gentle rising of the land where the fields stop and the grass grows wild and the wind moves freely across the open ground. On this hill stands the windmill, alone, always alone, a dark shape against the sky. The miller walks this path every morning before dawn. His feet know the way, the ruts in the track, the loose stone near the hawthorn bush, the muddy patch that never quite dries even in summer. He walks in darkness most days, carries a lantern when the moon is new, but he does not need the light. His body remembers, left foot, right foot, the rhythm of the climb. The wind is always here, always moving. It comes from the west mostly, carrying the smell of rain from distant mountains, sometimes from the east, dry and sharp with the scent of harvested fields. The wind shapes everything on this hill. The trees grow bent. The grass lies flat in silver waves. And the windmill listens to the wind, turns its face to meet it, catches it in canvas sails, and transforms its invisible power into the slow, grinding work of crushing grain into flour. This is where bread begins, not in the oven, not in the kneading trough, here, on this hill. In the dusty darkness of the mill where the stones turn and the grain falls and the air itself becomes thick with floating powder that coats everything, everyone, in a fine, pale dust. The miller reaches the top of the hill as the first grey light touches the eastern horizon. He stops, sets down his lantern, looks at his mill. The structure is dark timber, weathered almost black by years of sun and rain. The sails hang still in the pre-dawn calm. Everything is quiet, waiting. He places his hand on the rough wood of the tail pole, a massive beam that extends from the back of the mill like a lever, like a handle on some impassable door. The wood is cold, damp with dew. He can feel the grain of the oak beneath his palm, ancient, solid. This pole is as thick as his body. It extends out 20 feet or more from the mill house, and at the end there is a wheel, a simple cartwheel, weathered and cracked. This is a post mill. Not everyone knows what that means. The name tells you everything but tells you nothing at all. Post, mill, 2 words, simple words, but what they describe is something strange, something that seems impossible until you see it with your own eyes, until you put your shoulder to that tail pole and push. The entire mill house rests on a single post, one massive oak tree trunk as thick as 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder. This post is buried deep in the ground, set in a foundation of stone and clay. It does not move. It cannot move. It is the anchor, the axis, the point around which everything else revolves. The mill house itself, the whole building with its walls and roof and floors and the massive machinery inside, all of it balanced on top of this post. Not fixed, not nailed down, resting, balanced, free to turn, because the wind does not come from one direction. The wind shifts, changes, moves with the seasons and the hours, and the mill must turn to face it, must keep the sails perpendicular to the wind's path, must catch the maximum force. So when the wind changes direction, the miller walks to the tail pole. He grips the wood. He plants his feet. He pushes. And the entire mill house, tons of timber and stone and machinery, groans and creaks and begins to turn, slowly, so slowly, inch by inch around that central post. The wheel at the end of the tail pole rolls along a circular track worn into the dirt. The miller walks, pushes. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes to turn the mill, sometimes longer. Depends on the weight inside. Depends on how much grain is loaded. Depends on whether the bearings are greased or dry. The mill complains, always. The timber groans like something alive. Deep wooden sounds. The oak post rubbing against the oak frame, despite the grease, despite the careful construction, wood on wood, weight on weight. The sound travels through the structure. You can hear it inside. A low moaning that never quite stops, even when the mill is positioned, even when the sails are catching the wind perfectly. There is always that voice, that timber voice, reminding you of the weight, the pressure, the barely contained force. The miller knows this sound, has known it since he was a boy. His father was miller before him, his grandfather before that. This mill has stood on this hill for 3 generations. The same post, the same frame. Timbers replaced when they rot, sails mended when they tear. But the bones of the building, the skeleton that remains, darkened with age, hardened by weather, still turning, still grinding. He finishes positioning the mill, steps back, wipes his hands on his apron already grey with flour dust even this early, looks up at the sails, 4 of them, each one a lattice frame of timber, not yet dressed, not yet ready, just the bones, the skeleton waiting for its skin. The canvas is stored inside, rolled, carefully folded, heavy, the cloth is coarse, woven thick to withstand the wind. Each sail requires multiple sheets sewn together. The work of dressing the sails takes hours. It is not done alone. But first, the climb. There is a ladder built into the side of the mill. Narrow, the rungs worn smooth by hands and feet. The miller climbs, moves with practiced ease even in the dim light. His hands find the holds without looking. His feet place themselves. He climbs past the body of the mill, past the small windows, past the door, up to the level of the sails themselves. The lattice frames radiate out from the central windshaft like the spokes of an enormous wheel. Each frame is perhaps 20 feet long, made of oak beams with lighter crosspieces creating a grid, a skeleton of wood against the lightning sky. The miller steps out onto the first frame. The wood is slick with dew. He moves carefully, one hand always gripping. The frame is strong but narrow. Below him, the ground is 30 feet away, 40. The distance is hard to judge in this light. He reaches the rigging point. Hooks and ropes already in place from the last time the sails were furled. He pulls, tests the weight, then begins to haul. The canvas comes up slowly, heavy as a dead animal. Wet with dew, he grunts, pulls, hand over hand. The cloth rises. He secures it at the top of the lattice, begins to unfold it, spread it across the framework. There are ties every few feet, loops of rope that must be threaded through grommets in the canvas and then lashed tight to the lattice. His fingers work automatically. Over, under, pull tight, knot. Move to the next one, over, under, pull tight, knot. The canvas stretches, takes shape, transforms from a formless mass into a sail, a wing, a blade to cut the wind. The eastern sky is pink now, orange. The sun not yet visible, but its light spreading across the world. The miller works faster, moves to the second sail, climbs out along the lattice, pulls the next canvas sheet, unfolds, ties. The work is rhythmic, meditative. His mind empties. There is only the rope, the canvas, the knot, the next tie point. By the time he finishes the fourth sail, the sun is breaking the horizon. The first direct rays hit the mill. The weathered wood seems to glow. The white canvas sails brilliant against the dark timber. The miller climbs down, returns to the ground, steps back to look at his work. The wind is picking up, as it always does when the sun rises, the air warming, the cool night air being displaced by the heat of day. The sails begin to move, just a tremor at first, a ripple in the canvas, then more. The wind finds them, fills them, the lattice frames creak, the whole structure shifts. And then, rotation. It starts so slowly you could almost miss it. The sails move, inch by inch. The canvas bellies out, catches the wind. The massive windshaft inside the mill begins to turn. You can hear it. A deep grinding sound, stone on wood, wood on wood, the gears engaging, the brake releasing, and the sails swing past, swoosh. The sound of canvas moving through air, swoosh, again, swoosh. A rhythm establishing itself, slow, steady. The sails are 30 feet across from tip to tip. Their movement is ponderous, swoosh. There is no hurry in them, no urgency, just the patient acceptance of the wind's power, swoosh. The sound is hypnotic, swoosh. It never changes, never varies, swoosh. As long as the wind blows steady, the sails will turn at this exact speed, swoosh. The miller watches for a moment, checking, listening, making sure the rotation is smooth. that the canvas is holding, that the wind is being caught efficiently. Satisfied, he turns to the mill house, opens the door, steps inside. The interior is dim, dusty. Shafts of light come through gaps in the timber walls. The air is thick. You can taste it. Flour, grain, wood, old canvas, machine oil, all of it mixing into a smell that is unique to this place. The smell of the mill. It gets into your clothes, your hair, your skin. The miller's wife can smell it on him even after he bathes, even after he changes his clothes. It is a smell that marks him, identifies him, the miller. The space inside is vertical. The post mill is essentially a tall box balanced on its central post. 4 levels, maybe 5 depending on how you count. The ground level where the grain is stored. The stone floor where the actual grinding happens. The upper floor where the machinery lives. The gear wheels. The shaft. The brake. And above that, the space under the roof where the wind shaft enters, where the massive sails connect to the interior mechanism. The miller climbs the interior ladder. The rungs are dusted with flour. Everything is dusted with flour. The walls, the beams, the machinery, a fine white powder that coats the world. His hands leave prints on the ladder rungs. He climbs to the stone floor. Here, this is the heart of it all, the reason for the mill, the purpose, the goal. 2 stones, massive, circular, grey granite. Each one weighs more than a ton, perhaps 2 tons. Depends on who you ask, depends on how you measure. But the weight is immense, impossible to lift by hand. These stones required a dozen men to install. Block and tackle, levers, prayer. The bottom stone is called the bed stone. It does not move. It sits fixed in the frame, supported by massive timbers that distribute its weight across the entire structure of the mill. The surface is carved, grooved, a pattern radiating from the center like the spokes of a wheel, or like the furrows in a plowed field, or like, no, not like anything. The pattern is itself, unique to this purpose. Above the bedstone, separated by a gap of perhaps 1/8 of an inch, hangs the runner stone. This is the stone that moves, the stone that turns, driven by the wind shaft through a series of gears and shafts and couplings. When the wind blows and the sails turn and the machinery engages, the runner stone spins, not fast, not like a wheel on a cart, slow, deliberate, perhaps 30 rotations per minute, perhaps 40, depends on the wind. The grain falls from a hopper above, feeds into the center hole of the runner stone. The eye. The grain tumbles down into the gap between the stones, and as the runner stone turns, the grain is pushed outward by centrifugal force, pushed from the center toward the edge, and as it moves outward, it passes between the 2 stones, between the carved grooves, and the grooves act like scissors, cutting, shearing, breaking the grain into smaller and smaller pieces. Not crushing, this is important. The miller's father told him, his grandfather told his father, you do not crush the grain, you cut it. If you crush it, you damage the structure, you bruise it. The flour will be dark, heavy. The bread will be dense. Wrong. But if you cut it cleanly with sharp grooves, the flour is light. Fine. The bread rises. The texture is perfect. This is the art, the skill, the knowledge passed down through generations. Anyone can turn a wheel, but to dress the stones properly, to maintain the grooves, to keep them sharp and clean and correctly shaped, that is the work of a true miller. The runner stone must be lifted, regularly, the grooves inspected, recut when they wear. The miller moves to the hoist mechanism, a wooden beam, a rope, a system of pulleys. He hooks the stone carefully, tests the rope, then begins to crank. The runner stone weighs over a ton, but the pulley system multiplies his force. Slowly the stone rises, 1 inch, 2 inches, enough. He secures the hoist, swings the stone to the side. The bed stone is exposed now, the surface covered in flour dust. He takes a brush, sweeps it clean. The grooves appear, radiating from the center. The pattern is called a harp, like the musical instrument, curved lines, graceful, but also functional. Each groove is perhaps a 1/4 inch wide at the surface, tapering deeper, creating a sharp edge. These edges are what cut the grain. The miller runs his finger along a groove, feels the edge. It is worn, rounded, dull. Time to dress it. He reaches for his tools. The mill bill is a hammer, short handle, thick head, one side flat, one side peaked. The metal is old iron, dark, stained. This hammer belonged to his grandfather. The handle has been replaced twice, but the head is original, weighted perfectly for this work. And the pick, a small chisel, pointed, angled, made from hardened steel, sharp enough to cut stone, but carefully controlled, precise. The work begins. The miller kneels beside the bedstone, positions himself, chooses a groove, places the pick against the stone, just so. Angle calculated by eye, by experience, by instinct developed over thousands of hours of practice. He raises the mill bill, brings it down, tap. The pick bites into the granite. A tiny chip of stone breaks free, falls away. The groove is fractionally deeper, fractionally sharper. He repositions the pick, moves it along the groove perhaps a quarter inch, raises the mill bill, tap, another chip, another tiny adjustment to the stone's surface. This is not fast work, cannot be rushed. Each blow must be controlled. Too hard and the stone cracks, splits, ruined. A new stone costs more than the mill makes in a year, perhaps more than it makes in 5 years. You do not rush, you do not gamble. Tap, chip, move, tap, chip, move. The rhythm establishes itself. The miller's breathing slows, matches the rhythm. In, tap, out, move, in, tap, out, move. The light through the mill windows changes. The sun rises higher. The shafts of light shift across the floor, illuminate the dust hanging in the air. The miller works, moves around the stone, groove by groove. The pattern is deliberate. Start at the center, work outward. Follow the harp pattern. Each groove must be dressed evenly. The same depth, the same angle, the same sharpness. His back begins to ache. He shifts position. Continues. Tap, chip, move. The pile of stone chips grows, tiny fragments of granite, each one representing a single blow of the hammer. Thousands of blows, tens of thousands. To dress one stone properly takes a full day, sometimes 2. The runner stone waits on its hoist. It too will need dressing. But first, the bed stone. One task at a time, one groove at a time, one chip at a time. The sound echoes in the mill house. Tick, 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 the sharp tap of metal on stone. Tick, 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 a sound that has echoed in this space for 3 generations. Tick, 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 the same rhythm, the same patient work. Tick, tick, tick. Outside, the wind continues to blow. The sails continue to turn. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. But inside, the machinery is still. The stones separated, the grinding stopped. This is the pause, the maintenance, the care that keeps the mill running, that keeps the bread coming, that keeps the village fed. The miller pauses, wipes his forehead. His hand comes away grey with stone dust and flour and sweat mixed together. He drinks from a jug of water. The water tastes of flour. Everything tastes of flour. He drinks anyway, sets the jug down, returns to the work. Tick, tick, tick. The grooves begin to show their true shape now, cleaned of dust, sharpened, the edges catching the light. Each groove has a purpose. The shape directs the flow of grain, pushes it outward, ensures even distribution between the stones, ensures each kernel is cut cleanly, multiple times, reduced from whole grain to fine powder. The harp pattern is ancient. No one knows who invented it. The miller's grandfather did not know. His grandfather's grandfather did not know. It is simply the way it has always been done. The pattern that works. The design that creates the finest flour. Other patterns exist. The miller has heard of them. Straight grooves radiating from the center like the spokes of a wheel, called quarter dress, or curved grooves that spiral outward, called master dress. Different regions, different traditions, different types of grain requiring different approaches. But here, on this hill, in this mill, it has always been the harp, and the harp has always produced good flour, fine flour. The bakeries in the village buy every sack, never complain about the quality. Why change what works? Tick, tick, tick. The morning passes, the sun reaches its peak, begins its descent. The light through the windows changes angle. The mill house grows warmer, the air heavier, the dust thicker. The miller finishes the last groove on the bedstone, sits back, examines his work, runs his hand across the surface. The stone is cool despite the warm air. The grooves are clean, sharp, even. He nods. Good, this will do. Now for the runner stone. He unhooks the current hoist, swings the runner stone back over the bedstone. Carefully, so carefully, the stones must not touch, must not strike each other. Granite is hard but brittle. A single impact could crack either stone, or both. He lowers the runner stone, inch by inch, until it rests on wooden blocks, supported but accessible. The upper surface of the runner stone is flat, unmarked. This is the surface that no one sees. The underside, the surface that faces the bed stone, that is where the grooves are. The miller must flip the stone. This is heavy work, dangerous work. The stone is enormous, wider than a man is tall, thick as a loaf of bread. The weight is substantial. He positions wooden wedges, levers, begins to pry. The stone shifts, tilts. He adds more wedges, more support, tilts further. The stone is balanced on edge now, precarious. One good push and it will fall flat on the other side. He pushes, the stone goes over, lands with a thud that shakes the entire mill house. Dust rises from every surface. The air clouds. The miller waits for it to settle, then moves to examine the underside. More grooves, the same harp pattern, but these grooves are more worn than the bed stone. The runner stone does the moving, the working. It wears faster, needs more frequent attention. He sets up his tools, kneels, positions the pick, raises the mill bell. Tick, tick, tick. The work begins again, the same rhythm, the same patient chipping away at stone, creating sharpness from dullness, function from wear. The afternoon light slants through the windows, the dust dances in the beams. The wind outside continues steady. The sails continue turning. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hours pass. The sun lowers toward the horizon. The light turns golden, then orange. The mill house fills with warm light. The grey stone glows. The white flour dust turns amber. The miller works. His hands are steady despite hours of repetitive motion. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, as the sun touches the horizon, he finishes. The last groove, the last chip. He sets down his tools, stretches, his back cracks, his knees ache. But the work is done. Both stones dressed, sharp, ready. Now comes the delicate task, flipping the runner stone back over, positioning it correctly, lowering it into place over the bed stone. The gap between them must be perfect. Too wide and the grain passes through uncut. Too narrow and the stones touch, grind against each other, destroy themselves. He works carefully, uses the wedges, the levers, flips the stone. It lands with another thud, more dust rises. He hooks the hoist, begins to crank. The stone rises. He swings it over the bedstone, centers it carefully. There are marks on the frame. Reference points worn smooth by years of use. He aligns the stone, checks, double checks. Then he begins to lower. Slowly, the gap closes, an inch, half an inch, quarter inch. He stops, checks the gap with a piece of straw, slides it between the stones. It should move freely but with slight resistance. Not too loose, not too tight. He adjusts, lowers slightly, checks again, adjusts, checks. Perfect. The stone is in position. He secures the hoist, then begins the process of connecting it to the drive shaft. This is the transition. from maintenance back to operation, from stillness back to motion. The shaft that comes down from the windshaft above must couple to the spindle that drives the runner stone. The connection is simple but must be precise. A square hole in the center of the stone, a square shaft that fits through it, metal reinforced, greased to reduce friction. He climbs to the upper floor, releases the brake on the windshaft, disengages the gears. The machinery is complex up here. Wooden cog wheels as tall as a man, teeth carved from apple wood, hard and dense. These cogs transfer power from the horizontal windshaft to the vertical shaft that drives the stones. Right angle gears. Massive, primitive but effective. The miller checks each connection point, each bearing, each coupling. Everything must be ready. Everything must be aligned. Once he engages the system, the forces involved are enormous. The wind pushing the sails turning the shaft driving the gears spinning the stone. Tons of force transmitted through wood and metal and stone. He oils the bearings, wipes away old grease thick with flour dust, applies fresh grease. The smell of lanolin and tallow. He works methodically, checking each part of the system. The inspection is as much by sound and feel as by sight. He spins a gear by hand, listens to the sound it makes. Smooth, good. He tests the brake mechanism, pulls the lever. The wooden shoes grip the windshaft, hold it still despite the sails trying to turn outside. He releases the brake. The shaft turns freely again. Everything is ready. The stones are dressed. The machinery is greased and checked. The sails are catching the wind. All that remains is to connect the final coupling and the mill will grind again. But that is work for tomorrow. The light is fading now. The day's work is done. The miller climbs down from the upper floor, walks to the door, steps outside into the evening air. The sky is deep blue, purple on the horizon, the first stars appearing overhead. The wind has dropped slightly but still blows steady. The sails still turn. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He stands for a moment, looking at the mill from outside. His mill, his responsibility, his craft. The building looks solid in the fading light, permanent, as if it has always stood on this hill and always will. But he knows better, knows the constant maintenance required, the vigilance, the care, the knowledge passed from father to son, the techniques refined over generations, the understanding of wood and stone and wind and grain. Tomorrow he will engage the gears, load the hopper with grain. Let the stones begin their slow rotation. Let the grain flow between them. Let the flour begin to pile on the floor. White, fine, perfect. The result of all this work, all this preparation, all this knowledge. But tonight he walks back down the hill, his lantern lighting the path, his feet finding the familiar ruts and stones. The village below beginning to show lights in windows, smoke rising from chimneys, the smell of evening meals cooking. And behind him on the hill the windmill stands, alone, the sails still turning, swoosh, 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 waiting for tomorrow, waiting for the grain, waiting to resume its purpose. The brake wheel is the largest gear in the mill, mounted directly on the windshaft, 8 feet across, perhaps 9. The rim is oak, thick as a man's thigh. The spokes are oak. The hub is oak. Everything is oak, dark with age, dark with grease, dark with the accumulated grime of decades. Around the rim, wooden teeth, not carved from the wheel itself. That would be wasteful. When a tooth breaks, you would need to replace the entire wheel. No, these teeth are separate. Individual pieces of wood fitted into slots cut into the rim, held in place by wedges, by friction, by careful joinery. Each tooth is perhaps 8 inches long, 4 inches wide, tapered, angled, shaped to mesh with the teeth of the gear below. The wood is apple, sometimes hornbeam, hard woods, dense. These woods have a quality. When they rub against each other, when they work under pressure, they do not splinter, do not tear. Instead, they burnish, smooth themselves. The friction creates heat. The heat releases oils from the wood itself, natural oils. These oils lubricate the connection, self-lubricating. The teeth become smooth, polished. dark. The miller stands beside the brake wheel in the upper level of the mill. Morning light comes through the gaps in the timber walls. The sails outside are turning, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The wind shaft is turning, slowly, ponderously. The brake wheel turns with it, but the machinery below is not yet engaged. The gears do not mesh. The mill is not yet working, not yet grinding. He checks the brake mechanism one more time. A wooden lever, simple, mounted on the frame. When pulled, it draws two curved wooden shoes against the rim of the windshaft. The friction stops the rotation, holds everything still, essential for safety, for control. Without the brake, the mill would run whenever the wind blew. Uncontrolled, dangerous. The brake is released now, the shoes pulled back. The windshaft free to turn, the brake wheel rotating steadily, the wooden teeth passing, 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 waiting to engage. Below the brake wheel, mounted on a vertical shaft, is the wallower, a smaller gear, perhaps 3 feet across. The teeth point upward, designed to mesh with the horizontal brake wheel above. This is the clever part, the engineering. The brake wheel turns horizontally. The wallower turns vertically. The teeth mesh at right angles. Power transferred from horizontal motion to vertical motion. From the wind's push to the stone's rotation. The vertical shaft extends down through the floor, down to the stone floor below. At the bottom of this shaft is another gear, the stone nut, small, only a foot across, but powerful. This gear meshes with a flat circular gear, a spur wheel, mounted on the spindle that passes through the runner stone. The final connection. Wind to shaft to brake wheel to wallower to vertical shaft to stone nut to spur wheel to spindle to stone. The miller descends the ladder, moves to the stone floor. The runner stone is in position, hanging above the bedstone. The gap between them is set. The spindle passes through the eye of the stone. Everything is aligned, ready. He climbs back up to the upper floor, reaches for the engagement lever, a wooden rod connected to a mechanism that can shift the wallower slightly. Slide it sideways just enough to bring its teeth into mesh with the brake wheel. He pulls the lever. Slowly, the wallower shifts. The teeth approach the teeth of the brake wheel. Closer, closer. They touch. There is a moment of resistance, of friction. The teeth scraping against each other, finding their position. Then, mesh. The sound changes immediately. The quiet swoosh of the sails is joined by a deeper sound. A rumble, the wooden teeth grinding together. Not a smooth sound, not mechanical in the modern sense. More organic, wood on wood. The teeth are not perfectly shaped, not perfectly aligned. They are hand-carved, hand-fitted. Each mesh is slightly different, creates a rhythm that is not quite regular. Rumble, creak, rumble, creak. The vibration travels through the entire structure. You can feel it in the floor, in the walls, in the ladder. The mill is alive now, working. The power flowing from the wind through timber and gear and shaft. The vertical shaft begins to turn, slowly. The stone nut at the bottom engages with the spur wheel, more wood on wood, more rumble, more creak. And then the spindle begins to turn. And then the runner stone begins to turn. The miller descends to the stone floor again, watches the stone. It rotates slowly, majestically, the massive weight moved by nothing but wind, nothing but air pressing against canvas. The principle is simple. The execution is ancient, but it works, has worked for centuries, will work for centuries more if maintained properly. The stone makes its own sound as it turns, a grinding whisper, stone on air. The surface is not yet touching, the gap maintained, but you can hear the potential, the power. 1 ton of granite rotating inches above another ton of granite, the force barely contained. But the mill is not yet complete in its purpose. The stones are turning, the machinery is engaged, but there is no grain, no work for the stones to do. They spin empty, patient, waiting. The miller moves to the grain store, the lower level. Here, sacks are piled, heavy canvas sacks filled with wheat. Each sack weighs perhaps 100 pounds. The wheat inside is hard, kernels like small stones, gold and amber and brown, different varieties mixed together. Winter wheat, spring wheat, each type grinding differently, each requiring slightly different stone settings. He drags a sack across the floor. The canvas scrapes on the wood. The grain inside shifts, makes a whispering sound. He lifts the sack, grunts with the effort, carries it up the ladder, one rung at a time, careful, slow. A fall here could be catastrophic. The sack, the grain, the miller himself, all lost. He reaches the stone floor, sets the sack down beside the hopper. The hopper is a large wooden box, funnel-shaped, wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, positioned directly above the eye of the runner stone. The grain will flow from the hopper down into the stones. Simple gravity, reliable. But the flow must be controlled. Too much grain and the stones bog down, jam, stop turning. Too little grain and the stones run empty, touch each other, spark, burn. The control mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. The damsel. A strange name, but appropriate. The damsel is a wooden rod, perhaps 2 feet long, 4-sided, rough. This rod is mounted off-center on the spindle. As the spindle turns, the damsel turns with it, but because it is off-center, it wobbles, shakes, vibrates. Suspended above the damsel is the shoe, another wooden box, smaller than the hopper. The shoe hangs from leather straps, loose, free to move. The bottom of the hopper feeds into the top of the shoe. The bottom of the shoe has a small opening. This is where the grain actually falls through, into the stones. As the damsel turns, as it shakes and vibrates, it taps against the shoe. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The shoe bounces, shakes, and with each shake, a small amount of grain falls through the opening. The faster the damsel turns, the more it chatters, the more grain flows. Self-regulating, elegant. The miller opens the sack. The smell of wheat fills the air. Dusty, sweet, earthy. He scoops the grain, pours it into the hopper. The kernels tumble, fill the hopper halfway. He closes the sack, waits, watches. The grain settles, flows down into the shoe. The damsel is already turning, already chattering against the shoe. Chatter, 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 a rapid tapping, wood on wood, high-pitched, rhythmic, constant, chatter, chatter, chatter. The shoe bounces, shakes, and grain begins to fall. A thin stream. Golden kernels tumbling down into the eye of the runner stone, into the center, into the darkness between the stones. The miller kneels, peers at the gap between the stones. The grain disappears into it, pulled in by the rotation, by the centrifugal force. The kernels are caught, gripped, dragged outward. And as they move from center to edge, they pass between the grooves, between the cutting edges. The sound changes. The grinding whisper becomes more substantial. A hissing, a susurrus. The sound of 10,000 kernels being sheared, being cut, being reduced. The grain enters hard, whole, intact. It exits as flour, powder, transformed utterly. The flour begins to appear at the edge of the stones. White, pale, fine as smoke. It dusts the wooden casing around the stones, accumulates. The miller watches. This is the moment, the purpose. Everything else, the sails, the gears, the shafts, the maintenance, all of it exists for this, for the transformation of grain into flour. He runs his fingers through the emerging flour, tests the texture, rubs it between thumb and forefinger, feels the fineness, the consistency. Good. The stones are cutting cleanly. The gap is correct. The flour is perfect. But he must check, must verify. He moves to the tentering screw. This is the adjustment mechanism, the control. The tentering screw is a massive wooden thread, as thick as his arm. It extends up from the bearing that supports the runner stone spindle. Turning this screw raises or lowers the entire vertical shaft, raises or lowers the stone nut, raises or lowers the spindle, raises or lowers the runner stone. The adjustment is minute. A quarter turn of the screw might change the gap by the width of a piece of paper, but that is enough. That is the difference between perfect flour and burned flour, between cutting and crushing, between success and failure. The miller places his hand on the screw, feels the vibration from the turning machinery. He turns the screw, counterclockwise just slightly, a fraction of a rotation. The vertical shaft drops, the runner stone drops, the gap narrows. Immediately the sound changes. The grinding becomes louder, deeper, more labored. The flour emerging is slightly coarser now. The stones are closer, cutting more aggressively. He watches, waits. The damsel continues its chatter. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The grain continues to flow. The stone continues to turn. Too much. The gap is too narrow now. He can tell by the sound, by the texture of the flour, by the effort of the machinery. The rumble from above is more strained, the brake wheel working harder, the gears grinding more heavily. He turns the screw back, clockwise, raises the stone, opens the gap slightly. The sound eases, the grinding becomes smoother. The flour emerging is finer again, better. He turns the screw another fraction, testing, finding the perfect position, the sweet spot where the gap is as narrow as possible without the stones touching, where the cutting is most efficient, where the flour is finest. This is tentering, the constant adjustment, the vigilance required, because nothing stays the same in a mill. The grain varies, harder kernels one day, softer the next. Dry grain flows differently than damp grain. The humidity in the air affects the wood, affects the swelling of the timbers, affects the gaps in the machinery. The temperature changes, the wind speed changes, everything changes, constantly. And so the miller must tend, must adjust, must listen and feel and watch, must turn the tentering screw dozens of times a day, raising and lowering the stone by fractions, chasing the perfect gap, the perfect flour. He makes his final adjustment, satisfied for now. The flour is flowing steadily, white, fine, piling on the floor around the stones. The air is thick with dust. Every breath is heavy with flour. It coats his skin, his clothes, his hair, settles in the creases of his face, turns his eyebrows white, makes him look older than his years. But this is good dust, clean dust, the dust of work, of production, of purpose, not the dust of decay or neglect. This dust means bread, means the village will eat, means families will not hunger. The miller breathes it without complaint, has breathed it all his life, will breathe it until he dies. The sacks begin to fill. He has positioned empty sacks beneath the flour spout, a wooden chute that directs the flour as it emerges from between the stones. The flour pours into the sacks, accumulates. 100 pounds of grain makes perhaps 90 pounds of flour. The rest is bran, chaff, the outer husks of the kernels. This is collected separately, fed to animals, or baked into coarse brown bread for the poor. But the white flour, the fine flour, this is valuable. This is what the bakers want, what they will pay for. The miller's livelihood depends on the quality of this flour, on the fineness, on the purity, on his ability to maintain the stones, to adjust the gap, to produce consistently excellent flour week after week, year after year. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. The light through the mill windows shifts, changes angle, the shadows rotate. The mill continues its work. The sails turn outside. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The gears rumble inside. The damsel chatters. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The stones grind. The flour flows. The miller monitors constantly, checks the tentering screw, listens to the sound of the stones, feels the vibration in the floor, adds grain to the hopper when it runs low, changes the sack when one fills. The work is rhythmic, meditative, the same tasks repeated, the same checks performed, hour after hour. His mind empties. There is only the mill, only the sound, only the work, the rumble and creak of the gears, the chatter of the damsel, the whisper of grain being cut, The smell of fresh flour, warm, slightly sweet, the smell of the mill. Occasionally he climbs to the upper floor, checks the bearings, adds grease where needed, watches the brake wheel and wallower, listens for any change in their sound, any indication of wear, of misalignment, of trouble developing. But everything is running smoothly. The maintenance yesterday, the dressing of the stones, the oiling and greasing and checking, all of it is paying off now. The mill is running perfectly. The afternoon wears on. The sun begins its descent toward the horizon. The light takes on a golden quality. Warm, thick, the flour dust in the air glows, seems to catch fire in the sunbeams. The mill house is transformed, no longer grey and dingy, now illuminated, magical almost. The miller pauses in his work, wipes his forehead, drinks from his water jug. The water is warm now, has been sitting in the mill all day, but it washes the flour dust from his throat, clears his mouth. He drinks deeply, sets the jug down, returns to the work. More sacks fill. He has processed perhaps 10 sacks of grain today, perhaps 12. 90 pounds of flour per sack, over 1,000 pounds total. The sacks are stacked along the wall, ready for collection. The baker will come tomorrow, or the day after, will load the sacks onto his cart, take them to the village, transform them again. Flour into dough, dough into bread, bread into life. The chain is simple, ancient, unbroken. The farmer plants the grain, tends it, harvests it, brings it to the miller. The miller grinds it, produces flour, gives it to the baker bakes, feeds the village survives, plants more grain. The cycle continues. The miller is one link in this chain, essential. The farmer cannot bake without flour. The baker cannot make flour without the miller, without the mill, without the stones and the wind and the knowledge of how to connect them, how to harness the invisible power of the air and transform it into the tangible reality of flour. The light fades, the sun touches the horizon, the warmth of the day begins to dissipate, the wind, which has blown steadily all day, begins to drop. The miller feels the change, hears it in the sails, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The rhythm is slowing just slightly. The wind is dying. He climbs to the upper floor, watches the brake wheel. The rotation is definitely slower now, the wind dropping as it always does at dusk. Soon it will be too weak to turn the sails effectively, too weak to drive the stones. Time to stop for the day. He waits, letting the last of the grain work through the system. The hopper is nearly empty, the damsel still chattering. Chatter, chatter, chatter. But the flow of grain is diminishing, slowing. The last kernels tumbling down between the stones, being cut, emerging as flour. When the hopper is empty, when the last grain has been ground, he reaches for the brake lever, grips the wood, pulls. The wooden shoes swing inward, press against the windshaft. The friction is immediate, enormous. The entire mill shudders. The rotation slows. The rumble of the gears changes pitch, drops, deepens. The stones slow their rotation. And then stop. The windshaft is locked, held by the brake. Outside, the sails try to turn. The wind pushes them, but the brake holds. The sails shudder, strain, but do not move. The miller ties off the brake lever, secures it. The mill is stopped. Safe. But the machinery must be disengaged. He releases the engagement lever, pushes it. The wallower slides sideways. The teeth separate from the brake wheel. The connection is broken. Now even if the brake were released, the stones would not turn. The mill is fully stopped, fully safe. The silence is sudden, profound. After hours of rumble and creak and chatter, the absence of sound is almost painful. The miller's ears ring, adjust to the quiet. He can hear his own breathing, can hear the settling of the building, the creak of timber, the whisper of wind through gaps in the walls. He descends to the stone floor, sweeps the accumulated flour into the last sack, ties it off, adds it to the stack. 30 sacks now, maybe more, a good day's work, a productive day. He takes a broom, begins to sweep the floor. The flour dust is everywhere, inches deep in places. He sweeps it into piles, into sacks. Nothing is wasted. Even the lowest quality flour, the stuff mixed with dirt and debris, this can be used. For animals, for the poorest families, something is better than nothing. The sweeping is meditative, the rhythm of the broom on the floor, swish, 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 not unlike the rhythm of the sails, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everything in the mill has its rhythm, its pattern, its place in the larger pattern. He finishes sweeping, sets the broom aside, climbs one more time to the upper floor, checks the brake, secure, checks the gears, all clear, checks the bearings, cooling now. The heat of the day's work dissipating. Everything is in order, everything is safe. The mill can rest until morning. He descends, walks to the door, steps out into the evening. The sky is deep purple, the first stars bright overhead. The wind has dropped to barely a breath, just enough to stir the grass, to move the leaves on the trees downhill. The sails hang motionless, locked by the brake, waiting. The miller stands for a moment, looking at his mill. The familiar shape dark against the darkening sky. He knows every timber, every board, every stone, has maintained this building for 20 years. His father maintained it for 30 before that. His grandfather for 40 before that. 3 generations, 3 lifetimes. The mill endures. Tomorrow he will return, will release the brake when the wind rises, will engage the gears, will pour more grain into the hopper, will adjust the tentering screw, will produce more flour. The work is never finished, never complete, always the next day, the next sack, the next adjustment, the cycle continuing. But tonight he is finished. The work is done, the mill is safe, the flour is sacked, the village will have bread. He picks up his lantern, lights it from the flint and steel in his pocket. The flame catches, grows, illuminates a small circle around him. He begins the walk down the hill, his feet finding the familiar path, the ruts, the stones, the muddy patch that never dries. Behind him the mill stands silent, dark, waiting. The structure is solid on its post, the sails locked in place, the machinery still. Inside, the stones rest in their perfect gap. The flour dust settles slowly in the still air, coating everything, preserving everything. A fine white blanket. The wind will rise again tomorrow. The sails will turn again. The stones will grind again. The flour will flow again. But not tonight. Tonight there is only stillness, only silence, only rest. The miller reaches the bottom of the hill, looks back one more time. The mill is barely visible now, a darker shadow against the dark sky. But he knows it is there, knows it is safe, knows it will be there in the morning when he returns. He turns toward the village, toward home, toward food and warmth and rest. His day is done. The mill's day is done. Tomorrow will come soon enough. Tomorrow with its wind and its work and its endless rhythm. But that is tomorrow. Tonight you are safe. The grain has been ground. The flour has been made. The bread will rise. The village will eat. The cycle continues. The mill endures. The wind will blow again. The sails will turn again. But not tonight. Tonight there is only peace, only stillness, only the quiet darkness of the hill where the mill stands, silent, patient, waiting for the morning, waiting for the wind, waiting. Sleep now, the work is done. The miller walks home. The mill rests on its hill. The stones are still. The flour is safe. The village will wake to bread. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. The wind whispers through the grass. The stars turn slowly overhead. The mill stands dark against the night sky, solid, eternal, the post beneath it buried deep in the earth, the timbers strong and true, the stones dressed and ready, everything waiting, everything resting. Sleep, the miller reaches his door, opens it, steps inside. The warmth of his home embraces him. He is grey with flour dust. Tired, but satisfied. The day was good. The mill ran well. The flour is fine. Tomorrow will be good too, but that is tomorrow. Tonight is for rest, for the quiet, for the darkness. The mill sleeps on its hill, the sails still, the stones cold, the flour dust settling like snow in the empty spaces, everything quiet, everything calm, everything safe. And you sleep too, in the village below, in your bed, in your home, knowing that the mill stands watch on the hill, that the miller will return in the morning, that the bread will come, that the world continues its rhythm, its pattern, its ancient cycle of wind and grain and flour and bread and life. Sleep, the world is turning, the stars are wheeling overhead. But here, in this moment, there is only stillness, only quiet, only the deep peace of work completed, of purpose fulfilled, of the day done. The mill stands on the hill, the miller sleeps in his home, the village rests, and you rest too, safe, warm, fed. The rhythm of the mill has stopped. The rumble and creak and chatter faded into silence. Only the whisper of the wind remains, only the soft darkness, only sleep. Sleep now, the mill will wake with the morning, the wind will rise, the work will begin again, but not yet, not now. Now there is only this quiet, this peace, this rest. Sleep.